Hello and welcome to this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO. Joining me on this episode is Ron Davis. Ron is the CEO and president of the Jordan Davis Foundation. Ron, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for having me.
Man, and the pleasure is all mine. So I want to jump right into it because we have a lot of ground to cover. But I want to just set the stage by just learning a little bit about your early years, where you grew up and what your early life was like.
I was born and bred in, New York. I was born in Harlem, New York. You know, at the time when there was a lot of struggle.
Yeah.
I was born in 1953. And then we moved to Los Angeles, California for 6 years. And when they had the 1965 riots in Los Angeles, the next year in 66, we decided to move back to New York. And at that point, I lived in Queens and grew up in Queens, New York. And it was a fun time. It was about music, you know, growing up as a teenager. And I wish a lot of the teenagers today can experience what I experienced in the 60s, because that's when Motown had just come out. And instead of getting in trouble on the streets, I was really into the music. And, you know, I was always listening to the new acts that were coming out at that time.
So what was high school like? What were some of the challenges you faced as a youth there in New York as well as in California?
Well, in 1968, I was in high school, and that's when Martin Luther King was killed. And that was a troubling time in high school because the same friends that we had in Ozone Park, Queens, became enemies, so to speak. And, you know, you had a lot of friends of all nationalities, Italians, Jewish friends. And when Martin Luther King was killed, I always remember that all of a sudden the people that we go to lunch with, that we had fun with, we played basketball with, all of a sudden we're all fighting each other.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think as teenagers we really understood why we were fighting each other. You know, just because, as they say, leader became, you know, was murdered. And so those were something that I couldn't get my head around as a teenager. But, you know, I'm glad that a lot of the people in America understand what Dr. King was fighting for, what he was fighting about.
Right. So talk to me about just transition from high school. What was your next step in life?
My next step was, it was funny, I had a girlfriend and she smoked and I didn't smoke. And I would always get on about smoking, and she'd ask me for a match. And I said, well, I don't smoke. And so there was a book of matches on the ground. So she picked up the book of matches on the ground. And when she opened up the book of matches, you know, inside they had little messages inside the book of matches. And it said, would you like an airline career? Call 1-800 and whatever the number was.
Yeah.
And so she gave it to me. She said, you're talking about, you know, an airline career, because I lived about 2 blocks from John F. Kennedy Airport off of the Van Wyck Expressway in New York. And I used to always see these planes coming over my house. I was right off the runway. And I always wondered when I saw the lights in the windows where these people were coming from and where they were going to. And I said to myself as a young teen, I always want to go to those countries, no matter where they are, just to go and find out where they were coming from. And so when I got the opportunity from that matchbook to dial that number, I did. And it was an airline school. And they said that if you went to Kansas City, Missouri for the whole summer, that we will try to place you with an airline. So I went to airline school, and out of the class of about 60 students, I had the 3rd highest score. And so they placed me, and I had my choice at the time of going with Delta Airlines, National Airlines at the time, and Eastern Airlines at the time. And just God put his hand on my shoulder and said, pick Delta, because out of those 3 airlines, the only one that exists today is Delta Airlines.
Right.
You know, Eastern went out of business right away, and also National went out of business. And so I was really blessed. I felt I was blessed that I picked Delta Airlines. And I have a 33-year career at Delta Airlines. I started in 1973, and I ended my career in 2006. And I was able to travel all over the world. And that afforded me something that I would have never been able to pay for. That at the age of 20, I was in Brussels, Belgium, just to be there,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
that kind of thing. And so That was just a great time of my life.
So, talk to me about just family. So, when did you have kids? Meet your ex-wife, I think now. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I my mother and father, they were both World War II veterans. My mother was a WAC. She was a nurse in the Women's Army Corps, and my father was in Germany. And so they kind of told me about the world. And my brother actually went into the Air Force and made a career, 26-year career in the Air Force. And I decided as I was in the airline that I would continue to travel. I think I went to about the total now over 30 countries now. But my Jordan's mother was a flight attendant with Delta. And so I'm sitting there and I met her actually on the plane. And we're giving each other the eye and all that good stuff. And we actually started dating, and we went out for a year before we got married. And Jordan actually, we didn't think that we would have a child because the doctors told her that she wasn't able to have children. But lo and behold, she kept getting pregnant, and she had quite a few miscarriages, about 2 or 3. And she even had a fetal demise where you have to also, even though the baby is dead inside of you, you have to continue to carry the baby for another 2 months before, you can extract the child. And so we named that child Lucian, and I was there through the whole process, and it was very troubling time for me and her.
Yeah.
But as miracles have it, we met a specialist that turned her uterine wall around, and we had Jordan, and she had bed rest the whole 9 months, and so we considered him our miracle baby.
Yeah.
And that's why we felt so strongly about him. And we named him Jordan after the River Jordan in the Bible.
Yeah.
Strong river, all kind of things that you mentioned in the Bible that were happening at the River Jordan. And also at the time in 1995, Michael Jordan was doing his thing too. So
Yeah.
it was an easy name for us to pick.
Right. So, obviously, having had some challenges with childbirth, what do you remember about the day that Jordan was born?
I remember I was in the room because it was a cesarean, so I knew when it was going to happen, and I wanted to make sure that I was the first one to kiss my child and to see my child to come out. And I watched the whole thing. I didn't think I could stand up to it. As a man, we think we can stand up to a lot of things, but
Yeah.
when it comes to childbirth, we're watching it, live. It takes a lot of courage to stand up to that, and I did, and when he came out, they wiped him off. I was the first one to kiss him, and actually, when he passed away, I was the last one to kiss him while he was still Jordan. So those are the memories that I have. I remember him, we bringing him to my mother, his grandmother, and to her mother, his grandmother on the maternal side, and how happy they were to see a grandson. And so those are the happiest days of my life. And we lived at the time in Georgia, in Villa Rica, Georgia, which is about 45 minutes west of Atlanta. And we built a house out there and had a room for him and everything. And I just, when I look back on it, it is, sometimes you don't know the best of times until you look back on your life, and that was the best of my times.
Right. So just tell us about Jordan as a child. What was he like growing up as a kid?
As a kid, he was very loving. I mean, he would slobber kiss you, as I call it.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid growing up, he always had a lot of juicy mouth, lips, and he would just slob on you and laugh at you when you try to wipe it off and everything. As a kid growing up, and he liked doing that. He liked. I remember going out when it first had a really good snow in Georgia, and I took him out. And I remember we took pictures of him in his little snowsuit, and the first time that he ever tasted snow, we let him pick it up off the ground, and he tasted it, and he didn't know what to make of it. He thought it was ice cream, I guess. And the one thing that I remember is that he didn't realize that the snow that was left on his hand, even though the snow in his mouth tastes good, that snow that was left in his hand started stinging because, it started freezing his fingers up.
Right.
And all of a sudden he looked at me and just started crying, and I knew what that was. And I just started putting his hand in my mouth so to warm his fingers up and everything. And then he stopped crying. So, man, Dee, you bringing out some times I hadn't talked about in a long time. Yeah, yeah, that was good times. And then me, him, and Lucy did some traveling to Nassau, Bahamas with him, and also to Cancun, Mexico. We went to Mexico for a jazz festival, and just to watch him react to the music that was being played. As a matter of fact, he would tell you that one of the first songs that he liked was one by the Gap Band with Charlie Wilson. They were playing live at the pool at one of the hotels, and I remember Charlie Wilson and them were playing. He just really loved that music. He started dancing to that music. He was probably about 3 years old at the time, so around 1998. And it was so happened that I ended up meeting Charlie later on in life and talked to him about that. And he probably didn't remember, but that's okay. But he was very cordial and nice,
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that Jordan had a well-rounded friends, in the neighborhood. And so he had friends of all different nationalities. And we made sure of that because with us both being travelers, we had a good rounded circle of friends. And so that's what we enjoyed.
So did Jordan play sports or participate in any type of extra curricular activities?
Yes, we had him. He played sports. He played on the Winston little pony league team, and he was first he was a pitcher, and then he became the outfielder. He liked pitching better because he was the center of attention.
Right.
But then when they put him in the outfield and left field, he didn't like that so much. He would, and I was saying, Jordan, pay attention. He said, because he's out there, and maybe the ball will come out once or twice in left field. So. But, in pitching, you're always the star. So, but he was very fast on the bases. I mean, he'll turn a single into a double and a double into a triple. And, he's very, very fast. And, he always wanted to race me. And he didn't realize that my legs were longer than his. So you're not going to beat, even though the old man had some age, But he was a good ball player. He was a very good baseball player. Made his team all-star team. He wanted to play basketball because as he started getting taller, but he could rebound and he could run fast, but he had a funny shot. He just really couldn't make his shot as well as he would like to. So I think his best sport was that. We put him in swimming, and he was actually a great swimmer, much better than me. And I scuba dive. I've been a diver for quite a number of years, and but he was a great swimmer, and I used to take him to Jacksonville Beach once we moved to Jacksonville, and he really, really loved the beach in Jacksonville. And our favorite place was right near the pier. And so the place there will always hold a special meaning for me because my father, about 4 months before he passed away, came to live with me in Jordan. And so I was pushing him in a wheelchair. He had bone cancer. And I pushed him, and my father hadn't been to the beach in about 30 years. And at the time, he was living in Alabama. And so when he came up to live with us in Jacksonville, Florida, I pushed him right in our favorite spot on the beach, right by the pier. And so we had 3 generations there right by the pier, and I always remember that. And so I always remember that that is going to hold a special place for me, where I can think about my dad and think about my son right next to the pier in Jacksonville Beach.
So I know that Jordan was your miracle baby, and on if I have my facts together, November 23rd, 2012, something happened that would change your life forever. Walk us through that day, not just the incident, but the events leading up to that incident that day.
Yeah, the leading up to that day actually was the 22nd. Actually, I'm going to start about 2 months before that, maybe a month in October, a month before that. Jordan was sitting out on the patio of our home, and it was in the middle of the night. It had to be at least midnight. And I heard him out there crying. So I got my clothes on, came downstairs, and I went on the patio, and we were sitting there, and I was asking why he was crying. And he said, Dad, he said, I'm not going to make it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I feel in my bones I'm just not going to make it. Now, I thought he was talking about a few months before that when he was at school. Him and his friends were behind the high school, and these grown 25, 26-year-old guys came up to him and his friends, and they pointed a gun at Jordan and his friends and said, give me what you have. And these kids didn't have anything but about maybe between the three of them, $30. And he took one of them's cell phone. But the gun was pointed at each one of them, their heads. And that shook Jordan up. Of course, I reported to the police and they did nothing. They said these guys have been going around to different schools robbing these school kids. And they never came back with anything. Just took a case number. But I thought that he was talking about, for the fact that he had a gun pointed to his head and it scared him. But that wasn't what he was talking about. He just said, I just feel that something bad is going to happen to me, Dad. And I just don't feel I'm going to make it. And I cried with him and I hugged him. I said, no, I said, you got me and your mother here. We'll fight for you to the end of the earth. And I said, you have family around you. We all love you. You're going to make it. Don't feel that way. And so, I talked to him and stayed out there with him, talking to him, and brought him back in the house. And everything was okay at that point. But I never forgot that conversation. And then in November, the day before the 23rd, which was the 22nd of November, it was Thanksgiving that year in 2012. And Thanksgiving, I remember Jordan coming downstairs and he was just on the phone constantly calling all of his friends. And that was unusual because he didn't do a lot of calling. He talked to his girlfriend maybe, and that's about it. But he was calling everybody. And he just wanted to talk to all his friends. Aaron Johnson was one of his best friends, and Leland Brunson was his best friend, and just kept talking to everybody. And then later on that evening, when we had people over and we were having Thanksgiving, he said, Dad, I want to say the prayer. Now, in all of the years that he's been on this earth, not only did he not want to say the prayer, but if you asked him to say it, he would say something funny instead of really being serious about the prayer. So, I just kind of stopped asking him to do it because I know he didn't want to do it. But he asked me, can he do it? And so I said, yes. And he started praying for the family and started praying. And it was a serious prayer. And he started talking about how, all of his friends and how much they meant to him and all his family and how much they meant to him. And by the time he got through with the prayer, everybody was stunned, and it was smiling and we all hugged him and everything. And so my wife at that point was Carolina, and her mother was there from Mexico, and we all hugged him. And so the next morning, she was going back to Mexico, my mother-in-law. And so Jordan woke up early. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And normally he doesn't even get up till about 9 or 10 if he doesn't have to go to school. And he wanted her to kiss him goodbye, and she kissed him goodbye, and she prayed for him, and then she left early that morning, and then he went back to bed. So I thought that was unusual. And so later on that day, I was going to work. I was working part-time at that point at the Hilton Corporation for the Hampton Suites, hotel suites, and I had to be at work. And so about 2:30 that afternoon, he came to me and he said, Dad, he says, I'm going to the mall out of town center. He said, I just need a little money to go to the mall. So I gave him some money and I hugged him and I told him, make sure you're back home by, time I get back home that evening. And that was actually not knowing it at the time was going to be the last time I hugged and the last time that I saw my son alive on this earth. And, they went to the mall, the town center mall, and his girlfriend was working at the mall. He got to see her and talk to her. And as they were coming back, that's when they stopped at the Gates gas station.
And so what happened from there?
At the Gates gas station, the driver, it was him and Tommy and and his best friend Leland was in the back, and Tevin Thompson was in the front seat with Tommy. And so Tommy goes in to get some gum in the convenience store at the gas station. The kids are playing their music loud. They're playing their rap music, and I believe they're playing Chief Keef. And one car drives up, hears the loud music and pulls into another spot. Another car drives up, which is the car that Michael Dunn and his fiance are in, and they drive right next to Jordan, the car that Jordan is in, the SUV. And Michael Dunn's girlfriend gets out the car. She goes into the convenience store to get some wine because they're going to go back to the hotel. Now, they were just in Jacksonville visiting because his son, who he was estranged from, he hadn't seen his son but 3 times in 15 years, even though he only lives 3 hours away from his son. His son invited him to the wedding. So Michael Dunn had just come back from his son's wedding. And I guess the music in the car irritated him. So he rolls his window down and he hollers at the kids in the car to turn down their music. And the music is so loud they barely hear him. So they turn to look at him and his window's down. He's screaming at them, turn your music down. And so Kevin turns the music down and Jordan said, we don't need to turn our music down. Who is he? We're in a parking lot in a convenience store. He can't tell us what to do. And Jordan turns the music. He reaches over the seat, turns the music because Jordan is in the back. Him and his best friend. And so Leland is just sitting there, and the guy just going crazy, just talking loud. And so the guy rolls his window back up and decide, because the music is back on again, that he's going to roll his window down again and start screaming at the boys. And at this time, Jordan had enough of it, and Jordan is screaming back through the window. Now, keep in mind, Jordan's window is only halfway down, and there's child locks on the door. So he's not getting out of the car, and the cars are real close, where if you got out of your car, you would have to hit the other car. That's how close Michael Dunn parked to their car. And so Michael Dunn sees Tommy come out the store with the gum and starting to get in the car to drive away. And that always bothers me, because Michael Dunn knew that these kids within 20 seconds were not going to be there. He's getting ready to drive away.
Right.
But he had so much hate and so much racism in him, because he's a white 46-year-old guy, and he had so much hate for these kids that he reaches in his glove compartment, pulls out a gun that's in a holster, takes it out of the holster, pulls back the slide, rolls his window all the way down, and as Tommy's getting back into the car, he shoots 6 bullets into the car at the time. And the kids are in panic mode now. And they pull away, they back away, and then they drive out of the gas station. Michael Dunn jumps out of his car, gets down on one knee, and shoots 4 more bullets into the fleeing vehicle, trying to kill all the kids in that vehicle. 10 shots altogether.
Wow.
And when they see out the mirror that Michael Dunn's fiance came back into the car and they drove away, the kids turned right around, never left the parking area. They were in the same vicinity and came back for help because Jordan had gotten hit. And he had got hit by at least 2 bullets. And Michael Dunn drove away, never called 911. Even there was a police nearby who had pulled someone over for a traffic stop. So there could have been a police there right away. And when Leland hollered to the driver that Jordan had been hit and Jordan was laying in his lap, and they called 911, and Jordan lay there. And he just didn't make it. He just didn't make it. He was DOA, at the hospital when he came in. And that was the worst day and continues to be the worst day of my life. That Leland's mother, he called his mother, and his mother, Tanya, contacted me at work and didn't know that Jordan had passed away. Just said Jordan had been shot, and then I had to drive to the hospital. And I received the news once I got to the hospital that Jordan had died, and I wanted to see him, and I went in to see him, and it was an out-of-body experience. I just continued to cry. I continued to want to know why. I saw, and they told me not to touch the body, but I ignored the police. I ignored everybody in there, and I grabbed my son and I hugged him, and I saw a little blood on his nose. And I talked to him while he was there, laying there with a sheet over him, over his torso.
Hey, Ron.
And
Ron, listen, I wanna continue this conversation. We're gonna have to do another part 2 to this because we're out of time for this episode. So I want to hold you right there,
Okay.
and then we'll come back with the part 2. To my viewers, I want to thank you for watching this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, Dee Brown CEO, and remember, without you, there's no me.